Hi, Ross here from Search and Filter. Just ahead of our official V3 release, I thought I'd go through what this means for our V2 users and what you'll need to do to get up and running with V3. What we're planning on doing is making V3 available via your account. All new users will get V3 automatically. All existing users will be able to upgrade when they're ready by downloading it from the account section. We'll support V2 for a while. We're looking at the moment at around 6 months to a year. And what that means is we'll continue to support people on V2 and we'll continue to provide maintenance and security releases for V2. So let's get on to what do you do if you want to upgrade to V3 today. Right now, it's going to be a manual process. We are looking into automating some of it a bit further down the road. But for today's video, I'm going to show you how to do the equivalent V2 behavior or field or setting in V3. I'm just going to dive into a couple of sites that I've got set up. One is running on V2 and one is running on V3, and we'll see how to do the same thing in both. So first things first, we're on the V2 website. This is the V3 website, and they're set up mostly the same. We have posts and a books post type with just some sample content in there, some categories for the posts, and for the books. We have some sample books, and we have a genres taxonomy there. And on the V3, it's set up in exactly the same way. So this is the usual screen that you'll be familiar with. You have a settings and defaults section at the top, and at the bottom you have your search form UI with your available fields. What I'll say is V3 takes a bit of a different approach to this. So I'm going to kind of give some of the V3 names to these sections now. In the past, we've called this settings and defaults, and in V3, we're calling it queries. We have some query options here, such as post types and results per page, and relationships and auto count, and so on. So let's dive into V3 and how V3 looks at settings and defaults. We'll head to the query section here, and we can add a new query. And this will be roughly the equivalent of this meta box here. There's a bit of a different take. Previously, you would choose your post types and a few query settings first, and then you would head to the display results tab to choose how that's going to integrate with your website. In V3, we do it the other way around. We first choose how we're going to integrate with your website, which is here. And then we dive into the query settings, like post types and post status and so on. And I've just realized that we don't have Pro enabled, so let's enable that. We'll just go through some of the other tabs that are available in the search form quickly, and then we'll get back to the integration tab, which is probably where most of the changes are. In V2, you would have your post meta tab. You would add conditions like this. And in V3 is very much the same. You go to your post meta tab and add your conditions. Then we have the tags, categories and taxonomies tab, which we've just renamed to taxonomies in V3. And again, the UI has been streamlined a little bit. Instead of displaying all your taxonomies at once, you will be able to add and remove them one by one. And instead of only include or exclude, we now have include, exclude, and then exists or not exists essentially. Does a post have the category taxonomy, or does this post not have a category taxonomy, for example, in this case? And then I guess we'll just quickly review the query options. In V2, the query options were spread out over the general tab and the posts tab. So in posts tab, you would have post status, exclude IDs, sticky, ordering, and so on. And then in the general tab, you would have post types, results per page, field relationships. And in V3, we've just put all of that into the query tab. So you have your post types, post status, ordering, sticky, field relationships, and so on. Now let's get stuck into the integration methods. That's probably where there's quite a few changes. So in the previous version, you had the display results tab, and typically you would have as an archive, as a post type archive, using shortcode and custom display methods. Of course, if you had EDD, you would have an extra one there. And in v3, it's a little bit different. So let's see how we would create a post type archive in v3. From the integration type, we would select archive. And then from the archive type, we have the choice of post type archive or taxonomy archive. So we'll choose the post type archive. And then in this case, we choose, say, books. And underneath here, you can see, as you update things, what the results link would be. So I could head there, and I can see my archive for books. And just to note, depending on the archive that you've chosen, the query tab will be automatically updated. So the post types has been locked to books in the query tab because we're using post type archive books. In v2, there was a bit of a disconnect where you could actually choose too many post types or post types that don't have archives and things like that. So we've changed that in v3. We still have the familiar option of include taxonomy archives, which means we can filter the post type and its subtaxonomies, which is the equivalent of this checkbox here. And then in the Ajax section, we've renamed that to dynamic update, which I'll find here. And it's much the same. There's a few extra options this time around. We've added a loading icon, which is optional, and you can design that here. And so on. You can optionally fade the results, and you can update the URL as before. We've improved the URL update, so now we support the window history. So if you press forwards and backwards as the URL updates, the results in the search form will update accordingly. In v2, that wasn't possible before. And if we get down to the pagination, we have the equivalents here, pagination type, pagination selector. This time we do have a load more option, which we didn't have before. And currently we don't have support for infinite scroll, which we had before. We've done our research, and using infinite scroll is actually quite a large accessibility issue. We're trying to figure out the best way around that. We might add that back in with a warning, but using a load more button to load more results is much better and it's more accessible. So let's get back to our other display methods. The classic, we have using a shortcode display method. So I'll just show you what you need to do in v3 for that. By default, it's not enabled. So we'll go to the settings. Shortcodes are enabled here in the settings. If we go to the shortcodes settings, the result shortcode, enable support for classic result shortcodes. So we'll enable that. And now we can go back to the query. Shortcodes are typically placed on a single post page or CPT. So we'll use that as our integration type. And then when we go down to query, we'll see here the result shortcode option is now an option. And that's essentially the equivalent of the v2 display results via the shortcode method. One thing to note that's different is we've removed the results URL section from v2. It caused a lot of issues, lots of support, lots of people putting the wrong things in there. So now we've automated it. So this section here, you essentially specify your post page or CPT, and by setting it to current post, it's dynamic. Wherever you find your filters on a page, Search and Filter will try to work on that page. If you want to specify a specific page, say another page that's not the same page where the filter is, then we would uncheck dynamic or current, and then you can search for your page here. So we could go and choose one of our posts here. And that means that we would use this specific page to do our filtering. I'll put that back to dynamic for now. So there are just two more display methods that I want to cover and cover the v3 equivalent. One of the main ones is the custom. In v2, this means you would implement the query yourself somewhere, and you would add a attribute to your query, which is search underscore filter underscore ID. In v3, we can also choose custom, and the query attribute name is slightly different. It's search underscore filter underscore query underscore ID. There'll be a blog post and it'll explain exactly what the code changes would be. If we just save this, now we'll see we have an ID of 1 here, so it would be an ID of 1 to connect to this query. And then let's just quickly look at as an archive. This is quite an important one to discuss. We're deprecating as an archive in v3. You might ask why that might be. Essentially, it's not good for SEO. Plugins like Yoast SEO and other SEO plugins don't recognize this display method as a true archive. So we've decided to deprecate it. What I would recommend that you do in v3, if you still want to use like a PHP template, is to use the shortcode method, because the shortcode method gives you access to a PHP template and you can put your PHP code and your layout code and everything else in there. And you still get the SEO benefits that you would get from a single page or a post, because WordPress understands what that is. SEO plugins understand what that is. So that would be the recommended way forward. Just one thing to note regarding the result shortcode, that has also changed slightly because the v3 shortcodes have changed quite a lot. The result shortcode is a little bit different. So you probably have to swap that out with the new equivalent. Again, I'll put the code examples in a blog post. Now we've created our query and we've hit save. We'll see this connected field section. And this is very much like the available field section in the search form UI here. So if I want to add a field to this query, I would just choose add new here or here. Let's just go and add a search field to this query and we'll see how that works. The field editing UI is obviously quite different. You can see what you're making here. All your options are here and there's a lot more options than there was before. To make a search field, we'll choose from one of our field types here. And then we can update the label. We can show or hide the icon. We can change the URL name. That was a very often requested feature. And we have actually the ability to search into different data types. So if we have the default data source, that would mean it would search post titles and post content. But we could change that to say post type. And then we would type in a search term and it would match on the post type. Or we could choose post status, or we could choose one of our taxonomies, as well as custom fields. We're just going to leave it as a default for now. We also have a description field if you want to add a little description. And then we have the ability to change the width. And then we can enable on a field by field basis if we want to enable auto submit. That's when you start typing and then the search form reloads when you stop typing or when you've made your choice in the search form. So we can enable or disable that here. And we can actually choose a delay in case you want to be a bit faster or a bit slower. We're going to leave it as default again. You can also add a class to the field for your own kind of CSS styling. And that leads me on to the next point. One of the really important things for v3 was that you were able to style your fields without using custom CSS. So we've added here a styles tab. So I'm not going to get into all the options because there's quite a lot of options, but I'll just play with a couple so you get the idea. One thing we have here is a scale. So we can scale up the field. I'll scale it down. And we have the colors. So we could say change the background color, the foreground color, the border colors, the icon color, the clear color of the clear icon here and the clear icon hover color. So we could say and then the icon color here. So let's play around with that. So now we kind of have a dark mode going on. There we go. So we have here the label. We can maybe scale up the label, and maybe we want to shrink the description. We also have colors for the label and the description. Anyway, that'll give you a little idea of some of the options that are available. We have this for all the different field types. So let's go back to the query. Now we can see that a search field has been added to the query. Once we save our field, we'll get an option underneath which will give us a shortcode for the field. Another thing that's different in V3 compared to V2 is you can place fields wherever you want individually on a page. So there's not one search form to display in one specific order. Once you create a field, you get a shortcode or a block, and you can just place that individually on a page. So let's just do a quick test. And then we would copy that shortcode, we paste it here. Let's go back to the query and let's add another field or two. This time we'll add, say, a choice field. So that's usually a multiple selection field or a single selection field. And we'll quickly go through those attributes. So from the data type, we choose taxonomy. You can see here it's populated with categories. We can choose hierarchical. We have a new option here to limit the depth. So you could say only show all the parent terms. I actually believe there's no hierarchical terms here. Or you could go 2 levels deep or 3 levels deep. You've got your ordering parameters. And again, we can change the name in the URL. And then you get to the input type section where you can choose select radio, checkbox, button. You can enable or disable multiple selection. And you can also limit the number of options shown, which is another new feature. So we can say show 6 options only. Yeah, and we'll leave that as it is. And we'll go back. So maybe I'll also want to add this to my page. We can add spacing. And then I guess we should just complete this page to show it all up and running with the shortcode option. And for that we would need to use query with the ID and the ID is 1 and the action is show results. We'll actually add an option to copy and paste the shortcode here. And there we go. We've got the classic PHP template results. And as you can see, Dynamic Update is already working on these results. So let's cover the cache. We've renamed the cache to Indexer, which is a more accurate name for what it does. It indexes the content. And we've made it so that you can add it individually to each query, so you don't always need to run the indexer. Sometimes you want to build a set of filters or search fields that are really quite simple in behavior for certain types of content. And sometimes you want an indexer with complicated content, with custom fields, with dynamic fields and things like that. So we've enabled it on a per query basis. And to enable that, you would just head here. So we can enable the indexer and press update. And then if we head to the dashboard, you can see here the indexer has 37 posts in there and the post type posts. And that should allow us to have dynamic fields. Just to note, we have a field section here, which is a quicker way to access your fields if you don't want to go via your query. I'm just going to change this to something where we're going to be able to see the dynamic fields working. You see the results reduced there. Another thing I'd like to just mention quickly is if you're working with things like ACF or other plugins, some of our integrations, normally you can find them in the integrations page here, and you can enable them and disable them here. So let's just say enable ACF here, and you'll usually see our integration data types here at the bottom of the data type list. So here we've got ACF, for example, and we'll be adding more and more of those as we update our integrations and add more integrations to the plugin. So I think that's pretty much it for this video. We've covered most of the display results methods from version 2 and how to create the equivalent in version 3. And we've also covered how to create fields in version 3 and place fields onto your pages using shortcodes. There are still a lot more differences and a lot more things to learn about version 3, which I'll cover in other videos. I'd love to get your feedback, especially if you're coming from version 2 to version 3. So leave a comment below or get in touch via support. Thanks for watching.